Hi everyone, it's Erica Mackey from Maniacal Reader, and this is my June wrap-up. I did read all of the books that I did set out to read in June, and I'll get to those now. I know that in my June TBR, I said that I had planned to finish reading Maybe Someday by Colleen Hoover before I got the other books in my June TBR, but it turns out that I finished that book on May 31st, so I can include that in my May wrap-up. And I'll link my written review of that book down below. Since I finished Maybe Someday in May, I started reading Dare You To by Katie McGrath on June 1st. This is the second book in the Pushing the Limits series. This book follows Noah's friend Beth and the romance she develops with a guy named Ryan Stone. Beth comes from a bad home life. Her mom is addicted to drugs and alcohol, and her mom has an abusive boyfriend that has hit Beth and has hit Beth's mom. One night when Beth's mom's boyfriend tries to beat Beth's mom, Beth tries to hold up a baseball bat and is about to whack her mom's boyfriend down. And just before the police arrive because of a disturbance, Beth's mom tells her to take the blame, and she says the word probation. So Beth takes the blame for the accident and she ends up getting arrested, and her aunt and uncle bail her out of jail, and she ends up moving in with her rich uncle named Scott, who is living in Grovetown, and she has to move in his house in a new school. She doesn't like the idea of going to live with her uncle because she hasn't seen her Uncle Scott in years, and she's not really into the whole school thing, so she doesn't like school that much either. Ryan Stone is a high school student as well, and he comes from a rich family in Grovetown. Ryan has good grades and he dreams of becoming a pro baseball player. His dad always loves pro baseball too. Ryan comes from a very powerful family with a lot of connections, but Ryan always receives pressure from his parents to be perfect, and with them, appearance is everything. It turns out Ryan has a gay brother named Mark, whom his parents don't really accept, and a conflict in the novel is that Mark abandoned the family, when really Mark's family abandoned him. The romance between Ryan and Beth in this book is quite good, even though I wanted Beth to end up with Isaiah. Once I realized that Beth wouldn't end up with Isaiah, I kind of warmed up to their romance. At first, Beth was really doubting of Ryan, and she was unsure if she could trust Ryan, so there was this conflict between them. Like, every time Ryan would try to get close to Beth, she'd pull away and not really trust Ryan. Also, there was the side character of Gwen, which is Ryan's ex-girlfriend, and Gwen wants him back, so there's this whole tension of another relationship, plus the fact that Beth is upset living in her Uncle Scott's house, and she really just wants to get back to her mom and make sure her mom's okay. So there's a lot of family dynamics and a lot of conflicts going on, and I really enjoyed the romance between Beth and Ryan, but I do have to say I didn't like the romance as much as I did with the romance in Pushing the Limits between Echo Emerson and Noah Hutchins. I gave this book a 4 out of 5 stars. I'll link my written review of this book down below. The next book I read is Crash Into You by Katie McGrath. This is the third book in the Pushing the Limits series. This book follows Beth's and Noah's friend Isaiah, and this follows his romance with a girl named Rachel Young. As you know, Isaiah comes from like a poor part of town and stuff. Well, Rachel Young comes from, they're the richest family in town. The family dynamics in this book are very complicated but also very intriguing. Rachel has 5 siblings. She has a twin named Ethan, older brothers named West and Gavin and Jack. This family had another child in it named Colleen, but she died of cancer many years ago. And the mother of this family had all these children in the hopes of saving Colleen and having the children be a perfect bone marrow match so that Colleen could survive. But that's not the case, since Colleen ended up dying anyway, and the mother in his family isn't really over it, and all the other children in the family, their sole role was to save Colleen, and because of that, their parents don't really pay attention to them. And because this mother had a girl named Rachel, Rachel's whole role in the family is to replace the daughter that her mom lost years ago. Rachel feels that her mom and dad don't really see her for who she is as a person. They only see her as Colleen's replacement. Since Rachel's parents and her family don't really know her well, we find out that Rachel is really into drag racing, and so is Isaiah. And that's how they meet each other. But it turns out that something happens at a drag race and the cops get wind of it and they end up outrunning the cops. But it turns out that Isaiah and Rachel are now in debt to this illegal thug who is in street racing, and they have to find a way to pay him. So that's what the whole plot of this book centers around. Besides street racing and loving cars, Rachel always has panic attacks. She's had panic attacks since her freshman year of high school, and this is another secret that she keeps from her family. The plot in this novel is really gripping. I really loved it, and I gave this book 5 out of 5 stars, just like I did with Pushing the Limits. I would say that this book, as well as Pushing the Limits, are tied for me, but I liked Pushing the Limits a little bit more. I'll leave my written review of this book down below so you guys could check it out. The next book I read was Take Me On by Katie McGrath. This is the 4th and final book in the Pushing the Limits series. This book follows West Young, the young brother of Rachel that's mentioned in the previous book, and his romance with Haley, who's a fighter. At the beginning of the book, West is rescued from a fight with a guy, and Haley's the one who rescues him, and that's how they meet. This book is mostly centered around their romance and the secret that West is keeping from Haley, that he's a young and he doesn't want her to know that. Haley's background is that she's a tough teen who has recently become homeless before, and her dad lost his job. Haley doesn't really have that good of a life right now. I have to say that this book is my least favorite out of all of the Pushing the Limits books. I didn't really connect with West or Haley that much. I didn't really find them compelling. I gave this book 3 out of 5 stars. This book didn't wow me like the other ones did. I don't think their romance was as intense as the others in the series. So that's all I have to say about that book. The final book that I read in June was Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. This book follows 2 couples. One couple is a girl named Elizabeth and Mr. Darcy, and the other couple is Mr. Bingley and Elizabeth's sister Jane. I was totally wrong in what my thinking of the premise was of this book. The reason this book is called Pride and Prejudice is because it has nothing to do with racism, but the pride and prejudice that people have around issues of class. I liked this book a lot. I thought it was really funny. I liked the way that the romance developed between Darcy and Elizabeth. At first, Darcy didn't want to pay attention to Elizabeth because Elizabeth is on a lower social status than Darcy. Elizabeth didn't want to be attracted or be in a relationship with Darcy because she thought that he was rude and ill-tempered. This book kind of had a slow pace to it, and it kept my attention because I enjoyed the characters. It picked up during the end as the plot moved forward. I enjoyed the side characters in this book of Mr. Collins and Miss Bingley, Mr. Bingley's sister. She was a character who was sort of vying for Darcy's attention, and she didn't really like Elizabeth because she also liked Darcy. I also liked the character of Mr. Collins. He always had these absurdly funny speeches in this book, and it made me laugh. That's the end of my June wrap-up. I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye! Do you remember?